Welcome to Fatman on Batman. I'm Kevin Smith. For the inaugural episode of Fatman on Batman, you could go any number of ways. There's lots of Batman mythos out there to pull from, lots of people, great creators or interpreters, people who have worked with the Bat, in the service of the Bat, to make the character what it is and what we all know and love. Of anybody who's ever touched the character, and of course, and yes, this includes Christopher Nolan. Most people are like, he defined the Bat. He definitely did a fucking phenomenal job, but there have been many iterations of Batman, wonderful iterations. But for my money, hands down, the greatest Batman writer of all time, consistently, would be our first guest. Give it up for Mr. Paul Dini. Say hello, sir.
Shit, man, you humble me. I mean,
now I want to explain that because a lot of people will be like, "Fuck you, Frank Miller."
Yeah.
Of course, Frank Miller and Dark Knight is amazing, but and I'm not taking this away, to do something that amazing like The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
If anybody's lucky, you get to do that once in a lifetime, and he did it, and it was wonderful, and it set the tone for a lot of things. But you know what's really hard? Doing it over and over and over again. Every comic book writer knows this. You know, I'm a carpetbagger in the world of comics. I jump in.
Say that. You've written some great Batman
I
stuff.
appreciate that, but still, I'm not. That ain't my. I come in, I play, I fuck off. Like, I'm not a guy who's like, hey man, this is my living. So aside from getting to play with these characters, like, this is what I kind of do as my chief job. So even as a carpetbagger, I've always been the guy that's, you know, you respect a comic book writer who's in the trenches every month writing new material, because it's difficult to write any comic book, let alone Batman.
Yeah.
As Paul will tell us. Yeah. But there's lots of, any way you can go with it, but it's all been done a zillion times before, and you got to find a fucking new way for him to face the Joker. I mean, come on, it's not, it sounds like a great job, but it's fraught with peril. Paul Dini here has consistently, if you look at any episode, and we're going to focus today on Batman the Animated Series that started circa, what, 92?
92, yeah, right around then, and then continued on in some form or another up till about 2000.
So Paul will take us through all of that, including where our lives crisscross, and like how his writing plays a major important role in my personal life, not just as a fan, as a guy who's like, oh, I like what he's done. Yeah. You look at the Batman Animated Series, and it's available everywhere. You can grab it off iTunes. I'm sure they got it Netflix or Hulu or something like that. Or if you're a fucking self-respecting Batman fan, you better have them on DVD or I don't even know if they're available on Blu-ray. I've got the whole DVD set.
I'm not sure. I know that they came out with a huge box set.
A big old fuck off box set.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
A little bit of everything.
Look at all those episodes and you'll see many names over and over again. Not too many names over and over again. You'll see Glenn Murakami. You'll see Bruce Timm, and you'll see Paul Dini. Who else am I forgetting that I would see over and over?
Alan Burnett.
Alan Burnett, of course.
Yeah.
But Paul, for my money, man, is a guy who has touched the Bat over and over again, and not in that dirty way, in the right way. This motherfucker has time and time again turned in amazing Bat stories. These are stories written by somebody that obviously, well, this is my take, somebody who loves the character, but I don't know. Let's find out. Now, how did you get to Batman the Animated Series? Give us a little bit of prehistory. You've been involved in animation for a while.
I've been involved in animation since around 1980. I was in college, and I was like, I got a nod to contribute, scripts to a studio at the time, and I kind of jumped at it because I thought, I'm finishing up college, I have no skills at all, and I better take this. And besides, I like cartoons.
And so you were into cartoons? Were you into comics? Were you a geek? Like, were you the traditional geek the way we think of geekdom today, or no? Yeah,
I was a mega geek. I was into everything. Star Wars, horror movies. I saw it all. I'd be at the forefront of geekdom around 1979, 1980. However,
where is
it
this geekdom? What part of the country?
Boston and then LA, because I moved out shortly thereafter, like around early 1980.
So you would have gone to like some of the earliest San Diego Comic Cons.
Yeah, I did. I was 75. I was still in high school, and I begged my folks, like, can I go to Comic-Con? I saved up all this money, and they said,
but you're in Boston?
No, I was actually, my folks lived up in San Francisco. I lived in San Francisco. I was going to college in Boston.
Okay.
And so I'm home for school. I went to boarding school in Monterey, so I'm home from school, and I said, I really want to go to Comic-Con this year. Can I go? And they said, did you save your money? And it's like, yeah, I did. And it's like, okay. And at that point, I was a remarkably, independent kid. So I was about 16, 17. I went down by myself. I flew down on PSA, got a room at the at the El Cortez Hotel.
At a motel by yourself?
Yeah, it was at the El Cortez Hotel. Now, if you've ever flown into San Diego, you come in low and you see this great sign that says El Cortez, and it looks like something out of the 1930s. You know, like this would be a great swanky club. And at one point, I guess it was. And I went in there and I knew no one, absolutely no one. And I was scared of everybody, you know, because I was kind of a timid kid, and it would be like, oh, look, everybody's here. Oh, there's Stanley.
To be fair, you're kind of a timid adult as well.
I am a timid adult. You know, it's like,
well, wait a second. You walk into the room.
Yeah.
What is 1975?
1975.
How big?
1975 is a lobby just filled with people.
Okay.
Like, you know, not all that different from today. You know, everybody's wearing a superhero T-shirt. They all have the kind of like the comic book fan look. It's like Stan Lee, you know, with a little more brown in his hair, talking to a guy called Captain Sticky, who's like this great big guy who's come in with a peanut butter and jelly gun, and he can shoot peanut butter and jelly, and he's trying to get a deal with Stan going.
It's 1975?
1975. It's
could you imagine the innocence?
Yeah.
Or what if that character got sold? Like now they do the dark version of the peanut butter and jelly squishy man.
He's shooting it chunk style. Not smooth.
He's like, I'll take an eye out. Yeah. I'm badass now. Okay, so that's the hallway.
Yeah.
How many? Like, you know, when you think of San Diego Comic-Con, in case you've never been there, picture in your mind something that's the size of like 18 football fields put together, full of comic book geeks. And
I couldn't imagine it. You know, the closest thing I had seen at that time was a Star Trek convention in Oakland. And it was in a small convention center, and I walked in, and it was just space stuff everywhere. No comic books. It was star charts and NASA stuff. And
oh, get out of here. So there's no like, you came with money going, I'm going to buy me a fucking DeForest Kelly signed lunchbox. And they're like, son, would you like to learn about the asteroid?
Yes, there's that. And then there's a guy who's selling like homemade Star Trek monster masks. He didn't have a license to do it, but he made them, and they were really pretty good. He had like the salt vampire monster mask and the gorilla with the horn in its head, the Mugatu and stuff like that.
Did he do Kirk or no?
No, he didn't do any of that. He did it all kind of like unlicensed, but they were really cool masks. I remember buying the salt vampire mask and saying, oh man, this is real bitching. I got my souvenir. And took that home.
Putting yourself ever further from pussy.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Like, look what I got.
You want to suck face? Yeah.
This is gonna be another year, Paul.
Yes.
All right. So, how many would you estimate? How many people under 1,000?
Yeah, around that. It was
like. Have you ever been to a small? Let's say, did you ever go to the Church Con in St. Paul's Church in New York? You're probably way above that.
No, but I went to. They had BossCon when I was in college, and that was a small convention at a local convention center that took up maybe half the convention center,
right? Or
the basement of the Hilton in Boston. There were a few things like that, and the room was always, you know, tacky function rooms, couple of Logan's Run posters up, you know, Buck Rogers.
You're gonna make me cry. This is awesome. I want to go back in time to that show. Dude.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And boxes of comic books, and maybe a couple of old timers who were, you know, in New York who had come up from, you know, to the Boston area, and but really kind of rinky tink. It was nothing like the San Diego Comic Cons. Once the Comic Con hit around 1990, then it kicked into high gear.
That's when it became kind of at least a quasi version of the con we all know.
Right.
In the stand. That's when I guess they started moving to like the convention center.
Yeah. Back around the mid to late 70s and 80s, like the big stars were guys like Chuck Norris, and
he would come out for like promote a Delta Force or something.
Yeah.
Stan was there, omnipresent, I would imagine.
Yeah. Marv Wolfman, Len Wein, guys like that. Mark Evanier has been a fixture at every comic convention.
Right.
He's now sort of like Lord High Mayor of Comic-Con, you know, as far as Keeper of the Flame, and guys like that, Sergio Aragones. Again, you know, more and more guys from the East Coast were coming out here. I remember meeting Steve Gerber at a con, you know, like the mid 80s. And
how weird that you became contemporaries with most of these people, and also worked with them in some capacity.
The first time I met Frank Miller actually was around 1984, and it was myself and Carol Kalish, who was working at Marvel Comics, and her boyfriend Richard Howell, and we went out with Leonard Starr, who was drawing the Mary Perkins on Stage strip, and we went to a Mexican restaurant. We drank tequila till all hours of the morning, and Frank just asked Leonard questions about drawing, you know, a strip, because he had never drawn a daily strip before.
So he was fascinated in the process.
Yeah. And Leonard was just happy to be up from the drawing table because now he could drink and you know, cut loose a little bit.
All right, so you do that from 75 to what year before you're like, fuck it, I'm going into this business kind of? And where'd you get an offer to screenwrite? Like the way you described it, they were like, come try your stuff out.
Well, what happened was I was drawing like really idiotic cartoons for my school newspaper because I was just, doodling shit and they were publishing it. So I would just draw, whatever. And we had a family friend who was in the music business in LA, and he reminded my dad that they all used to be, when my dad was a singer in Boston, my dad knew a guy named Norm Prescott. And Norm Prescott was one of the executive producers of Filmation Studios. And
that's where I saw that name, man.
Going around a circle.
Yeah, in a
Lou
circle.
Scheimer and Norm Prescott.
Yes.
And Norm had the voice of doom. Welcome to the He-Man, Shazam, Lone Ranger Adventure Hour.
He's that guy?
He's that guy. He's that guy. He was that announcer.
He-Man.
Yeah.
And his friend Battle Cat. That guy's voice?
He did all the stentorian announcing, and Lou Scheimer would do all the funny voices like, hey, He-Man, we gotta go. Okay, Orko. He would do all the sidekick.
Get out. So he was Batmite, Orko.
And Dumb Donald on Fat Albert. It would be like, hey, Fat Albert.
What the fuck? A white Jewish man was the voice
man. On Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, when you had me do that scene with Chris Rock, when you guys were standing together, we were talking about cartoons. And it's like I broke his heart. He said, Cosby used to do all those voices. I said, well, no, he didn't. He goes, what do you mean? I go, well, Lou Scheimer, this 60-year-old Jewish guy who would do Dumb Donald, be like, hey, Fat Albert, let's go down to a swimming hole. And it was
Chris Rock rolled a tear.
It was like I told him there was no Santa. It's like, that's not true. That's impossible.
He totally backs off a fucking cliff.
Falls off the gantry.
One hand.
Yeah, screaming.
All right, so that guy knew your dad. And,
yes.
And your dad was like, why don't you hit that guy up?
Yeah, exactly. So what happened?
He hadn't seen him in years?
He hadn't seen him in years, but my grandfather owned a restaurant in Boston called, oddly enough, Dini's, and I worked there as a bartender. So I'm sitting there back there making real bad drinks for, Boston, politicos and everything, because it's right near Capitol Hill. And so, Norm shows up in town on a visit. I meet him for dinner. We, took him to dinner one night with his wife, and it was really nice. And he looked at my drawings, which were absolute shit. And he said, the drawings really are not, animation even by our standards, which are pretty damn low.
Yeah.
But the jokes are funny. So if you want to write something, just get, watch our shows and come up with something. So at that point, they were doing shows like Shazam and
The Shazam and ISIS hour.
Yeah, Flash Gordon and Heckle and Jekyll and Mighty Mouse, and before John Christopher Lucy did the really good.
Was
Mighty
that the
Mouse.
after?
No, it was a crap Mighty Mouse. John got his hands on it 5 years later and made it actually good.
That was where he did the sniffing the flower cocaine joke, where people were just like horrified. In the mid '80s or something.
But who was working on that show was kind of interesting was Sam Simon, and that was Sam
Sam Billionaire Simon.
Sam Billionaire Simon, who was a billionaire then, who was writing cartoons just sort of as a a fuck you, like fucking thing to do. I'll write some cartoons.
He was a billionaire in advance of The Simpsons?
Well, I think his family was pretty well off. That's what I heard. And he just loved writing. He loved cartoons. So he got to know Lou Scheimer, and Lou liked him because Sam's kind of, at the time was kind of cocky and really funny.
He's a funny guy.
Yeah.
I met him once. I went out to dinner with him one night with him and a family friend, and he was a very funny guy.
Oh, he's hysterical. He's great. He manages fighters also and does a lot of work with dog rescue.
He was kind of like a Renaissance man, in as much as he spun more than one plate. I guess when you get that rich, you can be like, and I also do this.
Yes, yes. And that was the thing. He was just, he was leaving Filmation because he got tired of the factory setup over there. And he didn't need the money, and he had just gotten an offer to work on a show called Taxi, which was starting off. So that was the thing. He went off and did Taxi with Ken Eston, and then from there the Tracy Ullman show, I think, and then The Simpsons.
Yeah, sprang from there. All right, so he leaves, and you go to Filmation at what year?
So that's about 1980, and I worked there for a few months.
At doing what? Like what?
Fat Albert,
like writing whole episodes.
Right, writing whole episodes of Fat Albert, and then
which comes down to morality tales over and over again. Now, when you write a Fat Albert episode, and a lot of people listening are going like, "What the fuck does this have to do with Batman?"
Yeah,
it all has to do with Batman. Everything in life is connected to Batman. But in order to appreciate, you have to figure out or hear every step, or not even every, but a lot of steps that it took for this man to finally sit down and be like, what does Batman say? Because when he did, he knew what Batman said more than anybody else on this fucking planet. You nail that character, man. You're writing in Kevin Conroy's voice. that is Batman. Whenever I read a Batman comic, that's what I'm fucking reading.
Yeah,
that's what I hear in my head.
You know, it comes from being kind of a scholar of the shit, you know, because when I was a kid, I used to fall asleep listening to comedy album time. You know, we lived near San Francisco, and the local station always played comedy albums from like, 12 to 1, and I would stay up late and listen to it and wasn't supposed to, but they'd always play Stan Freberg or Bill Cosby. So I'd listen to Cosby.
Oh,
Cosby
to
was
Russell,
just
my brother,
yes,
who I slept with.
Oh, fucking great. It's
if you
so
like
good.
comedy at all, and if you're listening to this going like, what does this have to fucking do with Batman? It'll get there.
It'll get there.
Go do yourself a favor and go listen to Russell, my brother, with whom I slept.
We had never seen The Belt, but we had heard of it.
If I hear any crying,
if I hear any laughing,
the belt will wail tonight. He's genius. What's beautiful about Cosby's comedy is he never cursed, and he was really fucking funny.
That's right. That's right.
But anyway, go back to Fat Albert. So when you write it, do you write Fat Albert? Or do you write Bill Cosby's like, what Fat Albert's thinking here is?
I tried to, and I tried to put a little bit of that Cosby that I loved from the radio in there, and I would make like little jokes and like references to some Cosby stuff. I tried to prove that I, had the little bit of the Cosby voice in me. So Cosby read it and was like, yeah, it's fun to write this, ain't it? And he kind of gave me a look like, it could either be like, this is terrible or this is good. I never exactly found out what he meant, but I'm in the recording booth and he goes, fun to write this, isn't it? And I go, yes. And then he went back and he did the rest of the lines. And
so you do wind up, the writer writes all the shit that he says too?
Yeah. He did Fat Albert's voice and he did the other characters and everything. And they liked me on that show. I mean, I quickly got around from, you wrote a little bit of everything, but, they liked me on Fat Albert and they liked me on, the comedy stuff they were doing. It wasn't all that funny. And they were gearing up to doing a Tom and Jerry cartoon when I left. And it just was, I was watching, what had happened was I started watching the original Hanna-Barbera Tom and Jerry's, which are beautiful, and they had the rights to all the MGM characters. So I remember this was even before DVDs or for VHS tapes were readily available. They had a little screening room, and we're sitting there watching some Tex Avery Droopy cartoons with like Droopy, the girl, and the wolf, and we are laughing our fucking asses off. And the only people who worked at Filmation were guys who were about 21. And guys who were 80, and there's nobody in between. You were either starting your career or you were winding up making insurance, hours by
golden age.
Yeah, golden age.
Salad days or golden age.
Yeah,
that's it.
that was it. And we were sitting there and we thought, isn't it? Oh man, it's going to be so great to do this stuff. And it's just like they had no budget to do anything like that. So we're watching this Tex Avery stuff and we're having delusions of grandeur. Oh, wouldn't it be fun to make something really that fast paced and
they're
funny?
Like, we're going to give you 6 frames a second.
Yes.
As opposed to, the Tex Avery stuff, 24 frames a second, because that was film.
Yeah.
Most Filmation stuff.
It was shot on 2s or 4s or something. You shot on 1s when you're trying to simulate live action with real smooth motion. That means it's like one drawing per frame.
Right.
And when there's action and everything. And then they would do like, you're drawing on 6s in Tom and Jerry because you're drawing these really stiff model shots of the characters walking like old men. And it was just depressing to watch. And so around that time, I just said, I want to go back to Boston. So I went to Boston for a year to finish up what little I had left to finish up of school and just sort of hung out. And then I began getting calls from Filmation, but other studios like, hey, you were writing for Filmation. You want to come back and work here? So I got calls from Hanna-Barbera and from Disney. And there was a guy at Disney who wanted to hire me for a staff thing because they were starting the Disney Channel. He says, I've got this, we're starting these animated shows at Disney. We got a job for you if you want it. Get out here. I'll see you next week. So I, told my roommates, I'm out of here. I'll send for my shit. Took the money I had, got on the plane. Went to Disney Studio the next day, found out the guy who called me was fired like an hour after he called me. And he was out. Oh, we frog walked him off the lot last week.
He was just calling kids in Boston and offering jobs. And
he was just being mean.
So what happens?
I called up Lou Scheimer and said, hey, I'm back in town. You got any more Tarzan episodes? And he said, shit, yeah, get over here.
They were still working on that
They
Tarzan
were doing
show?
Tarzan. He goes, and we got something new called He-Man or some shit. You want to work on that?
Did you work on it?
I worked on it. I worked on the development of He-Man. And
so even before there was a single episode, I know it's tough to... What was yours, so to speak? What did you add to the He-Man mythos?
What did I add to the He-Man mythos? Oh, God. I don't know, because I saw this thing recently. Somebody made a documentary about these guys who worked at Mattel fighting tooth and nail for credit over He-Man. And I'm going like, none of that stuff existed. Like, God, some of the names of the characters, that got used, like, I don't know, like Cringer or, like the other identities, like King Randor, Queen Marlena, some of that stuff, it was either me or Tom Ruger, who was working, who had just started working there at the time. Orko, I think we came up with. I know that when I saw the model for Orko, they were talking about how much they were going to merchandise the character, and I drew a big 0 on his nightshirt, and they said, "Is that O for Orko?" And I said, "No, that's 0 for what we get from working on this show. We get none of the money or the profits from this."
Is that so? Wait, He-Man was a Filmation show?
He-Man was a Filmation show. Like Mattel had done the development on it, but they didn't really have any answers. Like we go to these meetings, and it's like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and I'd say, "So who are the Masters of the Universe? Are they Skeletor and the bad guys, or are they good guys?" And they said, "We don't know. It's just,
we had a name.
We just have a name." And I go, "Well, you got this guy Stratos, who's sort of Hawkman. Is he good guy or bad guy? We don't know." It was Zodak, the Cosmic Enforcer. What is a Cosmic Enforcer? We don't know, but he has webbed feet, so we're thinking he might be bad. So it was like, we had to kind of redefine who these characters are. And so by the time they got to the second wave with guys like Clawful, we kind of figured it out. Okay, he's like a lobster man. He must be evil. And
were you writing toys that they then created, or do you guys slave to the toy market?
Kind of both. If they came up with something that really popped, they would consider it like, because we had so many episodes. This was the first time they greenlit a run of 65 shows all at once. The usual order for a Saturday morning show was somewhere between 17 and 13. And quite often a show that would be really popular in reruns, you look back and they only did like 13, 17 episodes of it. They just ran it forever.
Right.
Hanna-Barbera, a lot of their big hit, like the Jetsons was only in one season originally, Johnny Quest, one season. But they would just rerun them constantly. So with He-Man, it was the first time they did strip television, so we had 65 of these suckers. And then they did a pickup beyond that. So it was great. It was steady employment, but it was really kind of a grind writing it. And so,
how many years did you do He-Man?
Oh, God, maybe one all totaled. But, we had to do like one every 2 weeks, one every, or one a week, out of the rotation, which now I think about it was pretty grueling. I saw this documentary on Woody Allen, and he said that he took a season working in the Catskills, and he wrote a show a week, for skits. And I was saying, how did his brain not explode? I mean, it's grueling. And then I thought, I used to write those He-Man. I used to have like 10 days to write a cartoon script, from premise to finished script.
Right.
And that one thing that does is it teaches you how to write in that style, or get that style down. And if you're lucky, you can flavor it up a little bit. Like I did one where for whatever reason, Tila and the Evelyn are off together. They get, I don't know, some evil plot blows up, and it's sort of like, you help me survive the desert, I help you survive, then we fight. And I did this one scene where Evelyn just takes her helmet off and brushes sweat off her face and wraps her cloak around her and goes to sleep. And they're just kind of talking like not enemies,
Right.
And then suddenly I start getting letters like, wow, the character took her helmet off. That was a big thing because nobody thought she had a shaved head.
Right.
That was kind of big. But the other thing is they're kind of talking to each other like comic book characters, not like animation. We must stop his evil power.
Right.
They're talking like Moondragon and Scarlet Witch or something like that, or character, it's like Stan Lee characters, which was a big influence on me. Mm-hmm. And I thought anything I could bring from comics, because comics kind of is a bump up in kind of adult appeal. There are kids there were guys like 21, 22 who are still reading comics. There are guys who are 40 reading comics, and they're looking for that sense of character and continuity that says this is something more than just disposable entertainment. I mean, it is, but it's also saying that it's like, we actually have characters here.
Yeah. There's something more here at work. This isn't crass commercialization.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing a He-Man cartoon, it's like they're selling toys, but a comic book, it's like they're telling stories.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was something that continued over the time with shows like G.I. Joe and Transformers.
Did you work on those?
I did. A good friend of mine named Flint Dilley was in charge of those shows. It was for a studio called Sunbow. And Flint brought in guys like Buzz Dixon and Steve Gerber and a few other top comic book writers to write those shows. And so the G.I. Joe shows are having, a little, you got so many characters, the soldiers are having a bit more personality, and the story plots are a little more interesting than just, punch 'em ups. Mm-hmm. And that was the idea of getting comic book writers more directly involved in the stories. So it was kind of a good time in the early 80s to learn the craft, so to speak. And so I'd been jobbing around town doing that, and I think I'd written one of everything Sunbow did, one Transformers, one G.I. Joe. And then I was working at a studio called Ruby Spears, where they were doing things like Fang Face and Turbo Teen, a kid who turned into a car. And it was just sort of any wacky concept. And not really enjoying it. Then I got a call to come in and meet some people from Lucasfilm because they were going to do the Ewoks and Droids show. This is around the time Jedi came out. So I go over there and I meet with them, and they liked me a lot. And I brought in some scripts and some finished episodes that I'd done for a show called Dungeons and Dragons. And the animation on that looked really nice.
The Dungeons and Dragons cartoon?
Yeah.
You worked on that as well?
Yeah, I wrote the pilot. Well, Mark Evany wrote the pilot, and I wrote the next episode after him. And I was lucky enough to get a copy of the tape, and the animation was really good because they had farmed it out to Japan. So they'd done a really good job on it. So I sent that to Lucasfilm with a copy of the script, and the script hadn't changed that much since the actual film.
So you're like, look, I'm legit.
Yeah, and my stuff doesn't need a lot of rewriting because this is the first draft, this is the finished, and with very few changes, here it is.
Right.
So I got a shot to go up to Lucas with my friend Flint Dilley at the time and work on the developments for Ewoks and Droids. Flint wound up coming back to LA. I stayed on and worked on Ewoks for a while and working with George Lucas. And it was kind of interesting working with him at the time because it was more like I'm setting this up and then I'm kind of leaving it to its own devices and then I got other things to do. So I'm not going to be very hands-on, but I'm thinking about Ewoks as sort of this way and this way. And I wrote the development with him and he liked it and he let me go. And so that got to be, my show. And that was cute and cuddly and fun.
How many years you get to do it? How many seasons?
2. And then I worked for another year developing some stuff with him. He had a lot of stuff that he wasn't, he had kind of interesting stuff at the works. Like he had the game division in the works, but it hadn't really taken off. And he had Pixar in the works. So I would go over and I would see, and I would hang out with John Lasseter sometimes, watching him and his team come up with like the very first primitive cartoons they were doing, which
like
were
Luxo Jr. and
yeah, Luxo
and
Jr.
stuff.
and Andre and Wally B and Red's Dream. And I got to see all these things taking shape. And I would go, by the time he did Red's Dream, I was going like, man, I'm crying over a little unicycle, man. That's like, it's like watching Steamboat Willie. You knew that like 5 or 10 years down the road, he'd be making features. And, he was. And George didn't really know what to do with the place because he's really hands-on when he chooses to be. But he, if things are off by themselves, he kind of gets, he doesn't pay attention. So eventually he just sold Pixar and then went off and,
some other dude bought it. Forget his name, but did well by it.
Yeah, it did pretty well. They got a movie or two out. They did okay.
All right. So you're working, how long did you work there for 2 years?
Worked there about 4 years all totaled,
All up at the ranch?
Yeah. For the first half a year, we were over at ILM, and then they got the ranch all up and running. So I was out at the stable house in the ranch.
Oh my God!
You know the ranch pretty well. So it's the stables. So that was our place.
Was that the place? Did that lead to Warner Brothers?
It did, in kind of a roundabout way.
No, wait. You worked on Tiny Toons.
I did. That was what happened because while I'm up there, my friend Tom Ruger, who I was working with at Filmation,
his name was on Tiny Toons.
That's
all
right.
The time.
He was working at Hanna-Barbera, kind of doing like the latter-day Hanna-Barbera stuff with Gene McCurdy. So McCurdy gets hired to run Warner Brothers. She brings Tom Ruger over with her, and they start in. This was around the time. This was '88. They had just done Roger Rabbit. And Steven Spielberg really wants to do more cartoons because really, doing Roger Rabbit has really fueled his love of old style cartoons. And he wants to do something with Bugs Bunny, but Bugs Bunny is still kind of a Warner Brothers property. He wants to do something he feels like a sense of propriety toward, like he could actually get in and create. So the idea comes up like, what if we have like the new generation of cartoon characters that are being trained by Bugs and Daffy? They're still in the show, but a minor presence. And the show is about, the new characters.
Right.
So they put together a team to do that, and Lucasfilm had wound down, and I was kind of wanting to move back to LA because other than working at Lucas and Pixar, there's really nothing going on in San Francisco, unless you start your own production company. And this sounded like fun, and I was friends with Tom, so I said, yeah, sure, I'll come on back. And then it was a good move because Warner Brothers really took off with Tiny Toons, and then they did, suddenly they have they sold a bunch of shows.
Pinky and the Brain,
Tasmania, Sylvester and Tweety,
Animaniacs,
and this is the time of the first Batman movie, Tim Burton's first Batman movie. So doing a Batman show is a natural. And
do you remember first hearing about it? Like at Warner Brothers, you're working at Tiny Toons and you're hearing whispers of like, I think they're going to do Batman.
Yeah, there was some talk about that because they were looking at we've started.
Quick question. Did you ever work on Batman at Filmation? Because they also did Batman as well.
No, I missed that by a couple of years.
How fucking strange is that?
Yeah.
Like the entry-level place where you worked on everything, you didn't work on Batman.
No, because they weren't doing Batman at that time. I think they were still doing Super Friends over at Hanna-Barbera, but for whatever reason, I missed that. Although, to back way far up when I was in college, and this is in like the late 70s, I was at a film festival in Boston where they're showing animation, and that was the first place I'd ever seen the Superman cartoons. Was at the Orson Welles
Max
Theater.
Fleischer cartoons?
Yeah. It was at the Orson Welles Theater in Cambridge, and I'm watching them all for the first time, and I'm sitting there with my mouth hanging open because I didn't know superhero cartoons could look that good.
Oh, it was beautiful.
And I was thinking, like, why didn't somebody ever make a Batman cartoon that looked like this? Can you imagine Batman done in this style? It's too bad nobody will ever do that because they've moved beyond this.
Cut two. If you look at the opening of Batman, the animated series, the very titleless opening of the show.
Yeah.
It's A, cinematic, but B, the first thing it calls to mind, if you're a fan of animation, is the Max Fleischer Superman.
Yeah.
The look, the feel, the sleekness. You could see you and Tim must have had similar upbringings.
Well, what's funny about that, we did, but what's interesting is that once we knew that we were going to develop Batman, because Warner's was taking stock of everything they had that could potentially be an animated property. They looked at the Griswolds from Vacation, like what if we take Chevy Chase and family and put them in space, or in a time machine or something, Vacation, and here or there.
Right.
What about Gremlins? What about everything we have that sort of has that crossover appeal? And then Batman was something that came up, and Gene McCurdy had a big meeting one day where we were all in a big kind of like a office building. She called us all about to the elevators and said, "This is what we have in the works. We're looking. The Tasmanian Devil is really popular. We want to get a show going with him. Maybe one or two other Looney Tune characters. We are looking at the Griswolds. We're looking at Gremlins. We're looking at Batman. So if anybody has any ideas, bring them in to me." So what happened was Bruce Timm goes into her office about an hour later with the Batman model sheet. That's that shot of him like this, with the cape swirling. He sat down, drew it. She said, "You're on the show." I go in and I say, "I want to write for Batman." She goes, "You're on the show." Eric Radomski came in with some backgrounds, and it's like, "Okay, yeah, you guys want to be on the show? That's fine."
And backgrounds are literally that. And he drew like, say, the Batcave or fucking Gotham Harbor, or
what he had done was he had taken some kind of bright iridescent paint and painted it on a black piece of paper. And he said, "I see it sort of like this, like we paint all the backgrounds on black paper with paint that's going to pop or look kind of muted depending on the mood. And that way it'll make the whole show look dark. The whole show is like coming out of darkness."
That's awesome.
And she loved that vision. So she said, that was really great. And I'd gotten to know Bruce a little bit because we'd worked on a couple of Tiny Toon scripts together where we'd kind of done it sort of old school. Like I would write an outline and he would board it. And I got to say, as good as Bruce Timm is for superheroes, he's just as good, if not better, in some elements of doing funny cartoons. Like he'll never admit it, but the Tiny Toons boards that he did himself were brilliant. And
it's so funny because you always think of him as a very serious guy.
Yeah. And a year before, he had been working with John Kricfalusi on a revival of Beanie and Cecil that kind of imploded, but a few episodes got on TV. And that's when I first met Bruce. I was working on that show. It's like a weird little gap between when I was working at Lucas and before I came on to do Tiny Toons. Right. I was kind of drafted into that project with Chuck Lorre, of all people.
Fucking Mr. 2.5 Men, Mr. Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
He was working on it as well.
Well, what happened was this is 1988, as back in the old days.
Oh my God, you got so many years on you. It's
I
awesome.
know.
But you've been working. You know why? Because you've been working since you were a fucking pup.
Yeah, since I was 21.
The story begins almost in its infancy in teenage years.
Yeah.
It starts in high school almost.
Yeah. What happened was there was a writer's strike, and Chuck had some experience in animation. He had also written, I think, for Ruby Spears in a couple of places, and they liked him a lot at ABC. So they gave him the Beanie and Cecil show, and it was like a dogfight because the Clampett family, Bob Clampett's family, wanted the show one way. The network wanted it another way. John Kricfalusi wanted to make really weird, wild, experimental cartoons. Chuck was trying to figure out, how do I make the show and keep my sanity? And the strike was ending. He was going back to sitcoms, so they were looking around for placement. So I came in and, took over the show, and then the show just imploded. It was just too many people wanted too many different things out of it. Bruce Timm and I did one cartoon together on it. And when I saw his storyboard, I was going like, this guy draws better than anybody I've ever seen. He's totally self-taught son of a bitch and amazing. And then he would do the same thing on Tiny Toons. And, he hates drawing funny stuff, or I think he's okay with funny stuff. He doesn't like drawing animals very much. He told me as much, and always hated it when I would put them in scripts. It's like, I hate drawing animals. But he drew them really well, I always thought. And so what happened was...
So there's the three of you right there.
Yeah.
There's you, Bruce Timm, and
Radomski.
Eric Radomski.
And what happened was I wrote the original development on Batman. There were a couple of other writers, and there was a writer friend of Bruce's who got involved early on who was contributing some good ideas. And he had also had guys like Kevin Nolan and Mike Mignola submitting some character designs, that he had met through comics. So there's some really interesting stuff. A lot of Mignola's Mr. Freeze, I think, got used, because he had come up with a design for Mr. Freeze. And then what happened was Tiny Toons got picked up for another season and then a direct-to-video, so I went off and worked on that.
How I Spent My Summer Vacation.
Yeah.
Was that yours?
Worked on it, yeah. That was me and Ruger and Sherry Stoner.
You know what I always remember about that time? There were like three little girls that wrote a script and then they turned it into...
Yeah.
Was that real or is that hype?
No, that was real. There was girls who wrote a script and they thought, hey, we could take advantage of this. Let's animate their scripts. So.
And it's like pre-internet. So this was like now in the day of the internet, they'd be like, hey, we saw your short on YouTube. It's funny. We want to write a script for this.
Right.
But this was like 2 or 3 girls cold writing a script for a Tiny Toons episode.
Yeah.
Somehow sent it in to you guys, and then somebody, I guess, was like, let's fucking do it.
Yeah. It got to Steven's desk, and he said, hey, this is really cute and charming, and it shows kids are watching the show, and let's make it.
I still remember that to this day.
He was a really good collaborator to work with.
He?
He was very good, very hands-on. He had good ideas for all the cartoons. Occasionally he'd call us at home and say, hey, I have an idea for something. You want to, fool around? I was talking to my kids. You want to fool around with this idea? So we take it and, come up with something, pitch it back to him. If he liked it, we'd use it. So
there was a lot of Hollywood jokes in that show.
Yeah, he kind of liked that.
You could tell.
Yeah, he liked that because he would come in and sometimes he'd say, oh, I was at a party last night and there was so and so and so and so. It would be fun if we could do like the old 1930s like Malibu Beach Party cartoons. So we would do it and, put in the celebrities because it reminded him of the old stuff. And now you look at it and you go, who the hell are these people?
Right. I remember there's a blatant Jurassic Park and Hook reference.
Yeah.
I think it's in the same episode as the little girl.
I think that was in, it might be.
Robin Williams is like riding the dinosaur with the remote control.
Oh, yeah.
And Dustin Hoffman is talking like Rain Man, but he's dressed like Hook.
It was pretty
vague memory of that. Okay, so meanwhile, you're at Warner Brothers. The three of you are teamed up. You're off to the races.
Yeah, and then I come back on after some time off. I come back on Batman. Alan Burnett had been brought over by Gene McCurdy to kind of like story edit the show.
And nothing's aired yet. You're still building the show.
We're still building the show, and we're still figuring out the tone of the show. And I've been off the show, and some scripts had come in that are kind of lightweight by comparison, and those were some of our earlier episodes. And
like I've got Batman in my basement.
Yeah, Prophecy of Doom, a couple of others. They're fine, good action scripts, but they were, the show kind of wanted to be something else.
It was weird that didn't it begin with Cat in the Claw?
Yeah, it did.
Which is like as a 2-parter, it was of the character that you don't really like that she was made up.
Red Claw,
Red
whatever.
Claw.
Yeah. And then it kind of hit its stride because that was like on a Saturday debut, and then on Monday we actually started with Heart of Ice, and then people said, "Okay, that's Batman."
Let me fucking tell you the experience of watching Batman the Animated Series for the first time. I was working at Quick Stop in this era, and I would bring a VCR over because in Quick Stop there's no TV, no VCR. They had it in RST. But I started bringing TV over at first, and first Mrs. Topper was like, no, you can't do this. But then she would watch soap operas during the day, so she was like, the TV could stay.
Yeah.
Then I started bringing the VCR over, and I would tape the episodes next door because that had color TV, and also they had cable.
Wow.
And so then I'd bring them back to Quick Stop and watch them there. And I had the entire run of that show on VHS that I recorded myself and draw logos on and shit. When you see Heart of Ice, if you've never seen it, it is a spellbinding piece of Batman. So much so that it changed the character forever. Mr. Freeze was maybe you thought of Otto Preminger from the Adam West Batman show.
Yeah.
Never, always a Z-grade villain. Not even up there with he's almost a Maxi Zeus, but you remember him a little more because he's got the freeze gun.
Yeah, he's on a par with Egghead.
A little bit, yeah. Dini takes this character and writes everything that you may know about Mr. Freeze today. You pretty much know based on the episode that Paul wrote. Turned it into a tragic villain, who's just trying to do right by his dying wife and has to fucking commit crimes in an effort to save Nora. Heartbreaking. You're watching this cartoon. Now, mind you, you were amped for the fucking start of the Batman cartoon because you'd had the Tim Burton Batman movie and then they started the cartoon after Batman Returns.
Yeah.
So they started telling you like it's coming. And they showed the opening clip, what was essentially the opening of the show.
Right.
And you were like, this doesn't look like fucking anything. You know, we used to have Super Friends or the Filmation Batman or something. Suddenly you were looking at like, this is fucking dope. This looks like the comic book almost come to life. Like this seems more real than the fucking Tim Burton version of the movie. And we all loved that because it was close to the character. And then you see the Cat and the Claw and you're like, yeah, all right, that is good. But like Catwoman's in it and that was cool. And Batman, and you see a little bit of their relationship and you get to see what this new Batman's going to be like in the Batman animated series. But it's not anything to necessarily go, oh my God, this is genius. When you hit that, what is it, Fire and Ice?
Oh, Heart of Ice.
Heart of Ice. Yeah. When you hit Heart of Ice, right away you're like, holy shit, this is adults are making this for kids, but also for adults. This is class. This is like there are writers on the show, and it's not that shit like, come along, Beast Man, we must defeat Skeletor. Yeah. It's not. They're talking to each other like the way you were going. They're in He-Man. They're talking to each other in that one scene like they do in comics. Suddenly, you were watching the Batman animated series, going, they're talking to each other the way they do in movies. Yeah, like this is they're treating these characters legit. There's no joke here, man. Like it honored the books, the current version of the books, the modern age of Batman, as well as of course the origins. There were episodes in there where they even got to honor, the Adam West version as well. But that episode sets the tone. And you're saying Cat and the Claw aired on a Sunday. It was a night, right? They aired it at night, I think they did.
I think so, yeah.
And then they were like, and then it went into a regular rotation 5 days a week.
That's right.
So by the end of that episode of Heart of Ice, you're just like, Jesus fucking Christ. I remember calling up Walt Flanagan and being like, have you watched this Mr. Freeze episode? It's fucking dope. And it changes everything, man. Yeah. From that point forward, that show, it raises a bar to an almost impossibly high level for anything that's come after. Thank you. But the one that always captured, well, I mean, before we'll get to that episode, of all the things you did on the show, what ties us together for life is you created the character of Harley Quinn. Never existed prior. Yeah. You can't claim to create in Batman or Joker that they existed, but very seldomly does one get to add anything to the Batman mythos. Yeah. And you got to add something that's still they incorporated into the comics. Yeah. And no doubt when she's in the video games, eventually, she's going to be in a fucking movie.
Maybe at some point, yeah.
You created it's not even adding a spoke for the wheel. You threw another wheel on the bike. Yeah. Made it viable in a new way. And it's so weird that nobody had ever thought to give him a girlfriend.
Well,
where'd that come from?
I don't know. I'd kind of open these characters up like lobsters, and just, dissect them and say, what's missing from these characters? Like with Mr. Freeze, when we decided to make him really cold-hearted, if my time in therapy has taught me anything, it's like when a character is that set on a cause or that form of behavior, they're in denial in some way. So a guy who claims to be dead to emotion has got to be very emotional. You just got to find the right thing and work it.
Right. And with him, it's Nora. Yeah. Nora.
And I wrote that episode backwards. I thought, I want to see this guy sitting alone in a room, in a refrigerated room, and a tear turning into a snowflake as he cries. Right. And I worked back from that.
It comes from a personal place. It's a beautiful episode, man. Yeah. I mean, you can tell now. Just watching you get choked up talking about it, you can tell why the show works so well, particularly that episode, because emotion went into writing.
Yeah. Well, I'm really soppy, and that's the thing is, if I got a good script, if I cry at some point,
then you're like, oh my God, I got gold here. Yeah. Gold, I tells you. Yeah. What characters did you enjoy? Well, let's go back to Harley.
Harley was a joy because what happened was I wanted to write a story. She wasn't even I always wanted to do something about, you're a guy, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you had a worst day in your life, and then one time you decide to man up and you go, hey, fuck you, buddy. to the guy who's giving you grief, you get a good look at him, it's the fucking Joker.
Right.
And he gives you that look. And the Joker, I always think, looks at life like a guy walking out on stage in a comedy club. It's like, who is scared? You're scared of me. I'm going after you. You're my pigeon. You know.
Right.
Have you ever seen The Devil and Daniel Webster? The devil at the end when he's going through his books. Who do I choose next? And he looks at Walter Houston looks at it and he goes, to the audience, that to me is the Joker.
Right.
You know, a little bit of the devil, and it's like, I'm gonna get you.
Right.
Fuck you. And the Joker chooses people like that. He's not gonna go to somebody who stands up. He'll just kill him. But the guy who's afraid of him, he likes working because that, you know, kind of turns him on.
Right.
So I thought, let's have the Joker really just work a little guy until the guy figures out a way to turn it on the Joker, until the guy figures out in desperation. The last thing the Joker wants is to die like a punk, to have a little guy like me, you know, kill him in an alley. He's never going to get the big fight with Batman. And that's the thing the Joker fears, or at least he feared in that version of him in that episode. And then I thought, he's got to have a gang. Let's give him a girl. And the girl was kind of an afterthought because I was just thinking of a girl who's like a tough girl who's going like, yeah, boss, like even like a strong arm girl. But then I thought we had done Red Claw. We had done girls like that. There was nothing to her. And then I thought, what if she's kind of a throwback to the 60s Mall, you know, who kind of follows him around and she's a little vapid, and maybe she gets laughs when the Joker doesn't. That would piss him off too. Like if the other henchmen laugh at her jokes and then they don't laugh at Jokers, he'd probably kill one of them. And so I went into Alan Burnett's office and I said, I want to add the girl we're talking about. I want to make her funny and I want to put her in a little costume. And then I came up with the name Harley Quinn, and I thought, you know, for, you know, Harlequin and everything. And you know, that was that. And I went as far as drawing a little model sheet of her, and I gave it to Bruce Timm, and I said, what do you think of this as a design? He kind of looks at me and goes, okay, let's go to the blackmail file. And then he sat down and did the model that we all know, and you know, damn good one too. And then suddenly it's sort of like the Looney Tune characters. Nobody ever creates Bugs Bunny with the idea of, I'm going to create Bugs Bunny and he's going to say, what's up, Doc, and everything. It's like, hey, remember that rabbit we put in that cartoon? I want to bring him back and kind of rework him and play with him a little bit. And then another director wants him. And Harley became that way. She went from being the girl, you know, just kind of a bimbo girl following the Joker around to being, you know, like this psychiatrist that he had twisted and, you know, had fallen in love with him. It kind of, it came, you know, it was sort of a progression with her. There's nothing that denies that, but at the same time, early on, when the other directors were asking, hey, I want a Harley episode. When am I going to get one? You know, it's like, okay, we're going to bring the character back. And that's when Bruce and I sat down and we went over lunch. We kind of sketched out who she was and where she came from. And we both really clicked to the idea of like a kind of a Clarice Starling, Dr. Lecter kind of relationship on them, where it had been sort of, you know, warped and she had fallen in love with him. And, you know, but she was kind of going to use him also as to write a tell-all book about him. And, you know, she was kind of...
she was getting what she deserved.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. She was kind of shallow and kind of out for herself. And so that was sort of, you know, her comeuppance. And also we had seen, you know, there's a lot of, you know, there are writers like Grant Morrison who say, and I think Frank Miller also say, well, the Joker is like David Bowie. He's a rock star. Every rock star has girls running around with him who are there to either, you know, serious girlfriends or groupie girls who just do the bidding, and they're lucky if they get a pat on the head, you know. Right. And we thought, well, let's give Harley a little bit of that, you know, where she's the one who does kind of the shit work, you know, and
loves him no matter what.
Yeah. And actually, Brian Azzarello put in this great did you read the Joker graphic novel that he did a couple of years ago?
Yeah, is it painted or no? Or is the one where everyone's set in the real world?
Yeah,
Killer Croc is just a real big dude.
Yeah, yeah. He came up with this great, you know, Harley never really talks in that, but he came up with this great image of this thug. It's from this thug's point of view, where he walks by an open door in the Joker's lair, and the Joker's just sitting there weeping with his eyes open in Harley's lap, and Harley's just having a smoke and a drink and kind of patting him on the head. And that to me is kind of their private life. You know, the Joker opens up, and in those moments, he is whatever he is at his core, and all his demons come in. And the only one he trusts with that is Harley, or Harley's the only one who knows how to deal with him in those moments.
But then when other people are around, he's just, Harley, knocking her down. And shit like that.
And she takes it, you know. And I thought, man, I thought that was a really great way to redefine the character for a kind of like a live interpretation or a more realistic.
A realistic interpretation. Now real world, but I don't know. The Batman animated series is fairly real world for a cartoon.
Yeah.
You introduced the character there, but you gave her origin in comics first. Am I wrong?
Yeah. No.
In Mad Love?
Mad Love. We came out with that story in comics.
First in comics, and then later on you guys did a Mad Love episode.
Right. And we would hint at it through the episodes, like, who was she before she was a psychiatrist or something?
Dr. Quinzel or something.
Yeah. And we had kind of set the audience up for that. And, people, that was something else. It's like, hey, they called her a psychiatrist, and that fits in line with the comic book I read. So,
right.
And, so it was great to see the character take off and have a life like that,
And then they drafted her into the DC universe.
Yep.
Do you get a call about something like that? Someone going like, hey, can we have her, or they own her?
She had been in like the Batman Adventures comic book, they hadn't really made a big deal about that. She was just another character to use, but they did call me about that. And they said, we're going to do this big thing called No Man's Land. And we want to kind of incorporate Harley into the universe. Do you want to write the story? And it's like, sure. Okay. And it was a one shot, and, I had been doing these books with Alex Ross at the time, as the big format Superman and Batman books. So he did the cover painting of it, of the Joker and Harley together. And I wrote a story that kind of dovetailed into what they were doing with No Man's Land, yet kind of borrowed a little bit from the animated series, yet sort of was its own thing. And that sort of established her in the world. And from then on, she got her own series, and other writers took her and had fun with her.
What does that feel like when other writers? I mean, think about it's so weird. Bob Kane.
Oh yeah,
comes up with the concept of Batman many, many moons ago, and has since, in his lifetime, watched a zillion people take a shot at it. Now, and you being one of them.
Yeah.
Now you create a character for the Batman universe that now a billion people have taken a fucking shot at. Do you sit there and go like, oh, this one's on the money, or what the fuck were they thinking? Or, oh man, it's out of my hands. Or do you ever call up somebody and be like, you fucking ruined it? Click.
I don't, because it's like I signed the paper, they own her, and things like that. It's just, I just hope the character is well served, and the people who really like the character. It's really interesting. I like the character a lot myself, and the things I've written about her are not going to change. And if other people want to pick her up or play with her, I remember where she first got her first series, I was going like, well, they didn't offer it to me, but on the other hand, I'm busy. I'm writing a zillion other things. Don't feel bad about it. They just, and I didn't. It's just like, and somebody said to me, well, we would have offered it to you, but you're locked in over here and you're busy. And it's like, it's one of those things like, my plate's full and I can't eat anymore. And now they bring out the good cake. Okay, I'll just be happy with what I have. And I liked a lot of the stories they did with her. And it's just one of those things where you just sort of have to say, okay, she's off on her own. And I hope the character is well served, and, that nobody kills her in a particularly grotesque way, or they just retcon her completely out of existence.
Now, who in your head, if somebody has to play it in the real world, who plays it current day?
Oh boy, I don't know.
I remember once Kristen Bell at what Comic-Con were we at? I want to say Wizard World in Chicago.
Okay.
I want to say Wizard World. I'm pretty sure it was there. Either that or it was WonderCon. But I'm pretty sure it was Wizard World in Chicago. Mm-hmm. She was like, Kevin, you got to help me, man. I want to play Harley Quinn in the next Batman movie. And I was like, well, great, but I'm not Chris Nolan.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's involved in that movie, man, at all.
Yeah.
And she was like, but don't you think it's a great idea? Don't you think I could do it? And I was like, yeah, man, of course. You're like little and perky and shit.
Yeah.
Why not? But I don't think they make movies like that going like, hey, she'd be good for this. Why don't you throw her in?
Yeah.
She was so hardcore about playing it. And then since then, whenever somebody talks about who would play Harley Quinn in a movie, the first person that leaps to mind is Kristen Bell, even though she's not really, to me, the perfect choice.
Well, what was weird was actually one night I was out to dinner with some friends of ours, Kate Flannery, who's on The Office, and my friend Chris Cooper, the artist, and his wife, and Misty and I were all going out. We went to see an improv show, and then we get together with another couple who turns out to be Zach Quinto and Kristen Bell, and we all were eating dinner together. And we all kind of know each other, and, nobody's making a big deal out of it. And we had a really nice night together, and, we must do it again sometime. And then I never saw her again. Mm. And then about a week later, I'm reading in an interview with her, like the character she's dying to do is Harley Quinn.
Yes.
And if it had ever come around, like an official, I work on Batman, I created this character Harley Quinn, she probably would have gone nuts and said, oh, I really love that character.
Oh, she would have been all over you. Like, you got to tell me this. Give me the insight into the character.
I think she would be pretty good. I mean, it's like, I can't say who'd be the, there are people I think that would make a good Harley Quinn. I would actually probably like audition a lot of people for the part because I want to see what they'd all bring to it. But knowing what I know about movie making, they don't really think about that. They would say, okay, we're using this character and she's funny. What about Kristen Wiig? Kristen Wiig was in Bridesmaids. She made a lot of money. What Kristen Wiig? She
wouldn't be bad.
No.
Kristen Wiig.
Zooey Deschanel, Zooey Deschanel is
there
funny.
There you go. Fucking Zooey Deschanel. That if a studio exec was casting Harley Quinn right now, absolutely.
I probably would, give her a knife and a big mallet and have her, roll her eyes and do all quirky stuff and then kill somebody,
A big mallet. Dude, I'd give a half a heart on you talking about it. I'm just like, yeah, she would have a big mallet in the real world.
Yeah,
she could.
Yeah.
Batman.
Yes.
When you write the character of Batman,
yeah.
Where did you find your interpretation? What do you lean toward a particular take in the comics, or did you go deep? You pull from within? Do you see yourself do you write yourself as Bruce Wayne? Be honest.
I would love it if I was that cool. I don't think I am.
I know, but isn't that what we all dream about? Like most dudes that love Batman.
Yeah.
Probably two schools of thought. They're the people that are like, he just fucking kicks ass, man.
Yeah.
But then there are people that are just like, oh, to be the guy who everyone knows is this one thing, but secretly you're this noble other better thing.
Yeah.
That is 1,000 times better than the other thing that you're known as.
Yeah.
When I write fucking Batman, I am Batman.
Yeah.
I hear Kevin Conroy in my head.
Conroy, yeah.
In my head, and I am Batman. I'm just going in my head going, this is what I would think like if I was Batman. This is what and I lean toward the interpretation of, I loved Grant Morrison's very fucking almost dehumanized robotic take of Batman from his Justice League run, who was impossibly accurate. Just like that. I like that in terms of the Batman voice. When I write in my head, I'm like the guy who just has thought of everything a zillion times over. Is almost bored by life. He's fucking 9 steps ahead of it at every given moment.
Yeah, I mean that is the most fun I have writing Batman is when I have Bruce Wayne with this weird voice going in his, and this is more of the comics, when he can do the Sherlock Holmes thing to himself, because I think he's always on, like that guy's breathing heavily, he must have, he's kind of out of shape, he's lying, he's watching the guy's tells. I did this one thing where this girl is kind of romancing him, and he wants to know where she is from and everything, because she appears to be like a high society lady, and he's trying to get a bead on her, and he goes, let me give you my number. And she goes, oh, do you have a pen? And she goes, yes. And she opens up her bag. And then he reaches in and grabs out a receipt from her and says, I don't have a card. And he writes on it, I'll keep this. I'll take your number. And so he's gotten her number and he's got a receipt. And then he sees like she's been shopping at a cheap store, but it's like she's not going to take it away from Bruce Wayne because she wants that connection with him.
Right.
But he's always doing shit like that. And unfortunately, you can't do a lot of it in the comics because you got to have him punching faces and everything. So there are times I would love to write a detective novel where I could really get into that, because I think that it's almost like Batman is like it's like becoming the Hulk. You only see the Hulk twice an hour in the old show. Maybe you only see Batman twice because he's Bruce Wayne off solving stuff. But in the animated series, because it's a cartoon, you can be in the costume all the time. And I always thought of him as just a guy very good at his job who kind of he was still haunted by his parents' memories somewhat, but he powers through it every night and just goes out there and knows how to deal with these guys. It's Mad Hatter, it's Killer Croc. He sizes them up and he knows how to defeat them. If anything, one of the things I loved about the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr. is that he has that moment where he's sizing them up, and I would love to do something like that with Batman, except they did it there first. So
right. Where he does the whole kind of like, I move here, I knock this over, I do this kind of thing.
In the Arkham games, he can do a little bit when he switches to like hypervision or something, because he can analyze the situation and go into it a little bit better. But I think of the guy always a detective, always on, very restless soul, even when he's Bruce Wayne, and almost impossible to. It's impossible for him to turn it off. That's what I liked about The Widening Gyre. Is like that's the first time I've ever really believed that Bruce could turn it off, and he could have moments where, okay, I'm allowing myself downtime.
Yeah, the notion of just like, I'm going to try to not be Batman for a second. If you're in the middle of paradise with nobody but this person, there's nothing happening, no crime anywhere.
Yeah.
Can you just dial it back a little bit?
Yeah.
You said games real quick, so I want to hit on that. How many Batman games have you written?
2.
Which 2?
Arkham Asylum and Arkham City.
So the 2 that made gazillions of fucking dollars.
Yeah,
so you must live in a palace fucking on a second planet far from Earth that you take a space shuttle to.
I live in a Maytag box in an alley in Burbank.
How does writing a Batman game work? You just essentially, is it like writing a comic?
It's different. It's like a weird hybrid of the animated show, the comic, and a movie. And I look at it sort of like, okay, if I was going to write a movie, I would probably do something like this. If somebody said, you've got the keys to the Batman kingdom, what are you going to do? And I would say I would write a prime vision of Batman who's got the Batcave, who's got all the stuff, has some reason to fight a bunch of his enemies all at once, and that way you get to know a lot of characters in a short amount of time. And that's sort of what the games are, except with the game, as you know, from playing a lot of games, you can't bore the game player. You've got the comic book fan who's going for one experience. The game player who's going for more of like, I want to get out there and beat guys.
Right. Fuck your story.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I learned early on is when I started working with the Rocksteady group is that you can't have too much dialogue. You can't have too much plot in the cutscenes. The cutscenes are there sort of as like, icing on the cake. You have to keep the gameplay moving forward and the story moving forward, and yet you can't overburden the gameplay elements with too much story. You have to get them to dovetail, and that's really hard. But the guys I worked with were really terrific game designers, and they knew how to do that, and they were very good at teaching me very quickly with the first game how to kind of get that under my belt. So I felt like if I did another one, whether it's Batman or another, involved game like that, I would probably,
hit the ground running differently.
Yeah. And that was And that's the big thing is I think where I'm most of value in that is I know Batman's voice so well and Commissioner Gordon and the villains. So that if you've got a limited amount of time to get into those characters, this is the way Penguin talks. This is what he does. This is how he manipulates people. This is the way Joker talks. This is what Harley does, And so I'm able to give them little slices so they don't all sound like a bunch of goons who just happen to have different names. So it really is the Riddler or it is, Joker or whoever. And then, hopefully make the game experience an enjoyable one as you move through it. I found it a lot of fun.
It sounds like a good fucking time. And every once in a while, somebody's like, you want to write a game? And I'm like, I don't think I have the skill. I don't understand what it takes and blah, blah, blah. Like, do you write and now they go fight. You just go like, now they go fight. You guys fucking figure the fight out.
Well,
like you don't go like, he can do a roundhouse kick if you hit A, A, B, F.
Sometimes it is sort of like, like that, like I'll work with the designers and I say, here's a chance for him to do this kind of fighting. Or, it's like, I want to give him this weapon in a scene. How about he does this? Or he's fighting, with his bare fists and then a bigger guy comes out and he sprays gel on his hands and suddenly he's like, boom, boom, doing explosive punches. Can we work that in? And that's sort of like,
that's the beauty of a game, man. Like, can his fists explode when he punches shit?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, man.
We came up with this exploding shaving cream that he puts on his boots and, and his hands, and you figure he's got so much armor, it won't cripple him to use it. And he like hits things and he can knock down a wall Hulk style or knock out Bane or something like that. But with, it's fun being in that world. You got really good designers who, and some of it is like, okay, there's a fight sequence coming up here, but it's like, Joker has taken this person prisoner. Batman has to run through this level. Here's an idea of some of the obstacles. You get out here, there's a person suspended over acid. Here's what he says. Here's some alternates. It involves a lot of work. It's just as time intensive as writing a feature or an animated feature because you have to write all the different options and everything too. So, where I come in is where I think I'm of value is I know the characters' voices are pretty good at coming up with overall scenarios for the world and, sometimes surprises and, I contributed a lot to the ending of Arkham City and I said, well, let's go this way. And, you have to have a moment of suspense here or grief or even we need a bizarre laugh at the end here, just because you've been through this experience and
come up with a zinger or something like that.
Something like that.
Button on the scene.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about. I'm not going to narrow it down and say it's your crowning achievement because all the writing you did on the show was so fucking strong and standout. But for me, an episode I love and can watch over and over again because it's so fucking different than most of the other episodes. And you probably did it, what, season 3 or 4 down the road. It's called Over the Edge.
Yeah.
And it's an episode that if you're a fan of the Bat universe, not only does it have Batman and Robin, because years later you got into the Robin of all, it also has Nightwing. Barbara Gordon figures prominently, Batgirl. Scarecrow shows up. There is a depiction of Bane, which is probably my favorite until we've seen this recent movie round.
Yeah,
he's so fantastic, and the voices. He's good evening, Mr. Wayne.
Oh, the whole thing, yeah.
And and he's that one line where he's like, "What else would you expect from a killer of children?"
Yeah, he just knows how to get at Batman.
So fucking good. Tell the folks at home what the plot is of this episode. Without spoiling the end. We'll spoil it for him later because it's fucking nearly 20 years old. They can't spoil
you got to have seen it. The plot is it opens with Batman and Robin running through the Batcave.
One of the best openings of any cartoon ever and it's one of these things where you're like, shit, I wish they'd open the movies like this.
Yeah.
It begins in the middle of an action scene. It's almost like the beginning of Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah.
Just boom, you're in the middle of Batman and Robin running across a rooftop. It's no longer, they don't subtly bring you into it. It's not, hey man, here's the crime that's about to go down, or one evening in Gotham. Suddenly, you're just in the middle of all this action.
They're running through the Batcave. They're being chased by Gordon, who's calling Batman by name, and there's a SWAT team after him. He's saying, "Bruce Wayne, stop where you are." And so you're looking at this like, "Oh man, some evil shit went down."
This is the beginning of the episode. You're like, "What the fuck happened?"
Yeah,
and then you feel like you missed the first part of a two-parter.
Yeah, and the idea was.
They jump in a boat, dude.
Yeah, they jump in the boat and they go off, and there's a police boat waiting for them outside the entrance.
And he ain't lying. And they're firing at them in the Batcave.
Yeah.
Like you're watching Batman and Robin escape from the Batcave with gunfire hitting
Alfred gets beaten down by Bullock, watch it, Jeeves. And he gets slugged in the stomach because Gordon's going to kill Batman, and Alfred spoils the shot. And you're going like, okay, are we on Earth too? Is this a dream? It can't be real. It can't be real. And the idea was I wanted to play it real. Like, here's the scenario. While fighting crime, with his team, Batgirl is killed. Commissioner Gordon is the first one to find the body, unmasks her. Oh shit, it's my daughter. You son of a bitch. How could you not tell?
Look at you. You're getting emotional again. It's awesome.
Here I am.
You're gold, dude. I'm going to hand you every piece of writing. If you cry, it's gold. Amazing. But you're fucking right. It's a really wonderful scene because he gets there and he pulls off the mask and he's like, Barbara?
Yeah.
And suddenly that relationship that he's had with Batman all this time is null and void.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you killed my daughter.
And it's like, and then there's a scene where he calls Wayne Manor, and for a second, Bruce answers the phone. It's like, hello, Commissioner. Like nothing has happened. And it's like, you sick maniac, or whatever he says. And it's like, I trusted you. I worked with you. She was my daughter. And you never told me. And it's like, well, and he goes back to, well, my parents got killed. What happened? And he goes, yeah, that makes two of us. And then he just leads the SWAT team into
the episode begins in the Batcave with the escape. And then once they're free and clear of the Gotham Harbor,
Nightwing what happened, because Nightwing joins them later.
Nightwing joins him and he tells them kind of like, because he's like, what happened? And he tells them kind of, this is blah, 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 the story. So it brings you back into the present of the story.
Yeah. And then Dick says, he's moved out of the Batcave in our continuity, and he had a loft and his own armory there. He's going to get some stuff, and they're going to move to a new location. But once he shows up there, the cops are waiting for him there. And now we get to see how deadly Gordon is, and the lessons he's learned, that he stalks the members of Batman's team and hunts them down. He gets rid of Nightwing, gets him in jail, and he sets a trap with his daughter's funeral. He knows that Batman is going to be there. He knows he's got such guilt that he's got to, he will be there to look at Barbara one last time. And as soon as Batman shows up, he leads, the SWAT team against him, and he chases them for the rooftops. But he's got one ace in the hole, and he's made a deal with Bane. He gets Bane out of jail, saying, look, I want you to beat him up, give him to me, and I'm going to lock him in Arkham to rot away. And then, of course, Bane changes the rules and says, nope, thought about it, doesn't work for me.
Awesome scene. He's on the rooftop, fucking door gets kicked open, and suddenly you're like, Bane. The first time I ever liked the use of the character.
Yeah.
Like in the comics, I always thought He looks like a lucha wrestler.
Yeah, it was kind of a goof in that episode. We weren't sure what to make of him. We weren't sure if DC was
good
serious
in your
about,
episode, man. It was fucking tight. He was a badass and shit, and he had that deep fucking voice. And he referenced the fact that Batman was responsible, kind of, for Barbara Gordon's death. He wasn't. It was actually the Scarecrow, correct?
The Scarecrow. Barbara
in the flashback, we left that part out.
Oh yeah.
In the flashback, when Bruce is when Batman's telling Nightwing what happened, they're talking about covering the Scarecrow case,
right?
And it was a badass redesign of the Scarecrow,
the hanged man look.
Yes. Oh, he looked
with
fucking
a cadaverous face.
Yes.
It was one of Bruce's best designs.
It's so spooky.
Yeah.
And they were involved in the case where they're on a rooftop, and he got the jump on Barbara and fucking knocked her off the roof with his cane, whatever he is.
And she falls, 50 stories to her death on top of Gordon's car.
Yes.
We saw that shot from the inside where she just hits it, shatters the glass, and bounces off. I watched that the other night, and I was going like, "Fuck, man, that was."
It
hardcore.
Is a fantastic episode, especially if you've watched every episode and they throw you into the midst of this. You're like, "What the fuck?" And you don't know. You're like, are they done with the show? Because what it begins to feel like is the last Batman story ever.
Yes.
Which, every once in a while in the comics, they'll do like the last fucking ever.
Yeah.
But for me, Neil Gaiman in the comics did, the Batman funeral story or whatever happened to Batman or blah, blah, blah. The Alan Moore, whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, Superman story comes to mind. But very rarely do you do a Batman, the last Batman story. I mean, Dark Knight Returns is one of those. This is the ultimate last Batman story.
That's the frame of mind I put myself in. I thought, Batman's secret is exposed. Okay, under what conditions and what would happen to him? And I'm thinking if it's a betrayal of Gordon's trust, Gordon has become his deadliest enemy because Gordon knows all his tricks. Even unconsciously, he knows how to get him. If he was put in a position, I could take this guy down.
He says in the dialogue, "I've been protecting you for years." Who does the voice of Gordon on that?
That was Bob Hastings. He was really good.
He's so good. He was really good.
He gave it such drama in this, and he goes after him with everything he's got, and right in the middle of this, it gets so grim that I just had to put in, I got to put in something a little bit funny, or I got to lighten the mood a little bit. So I have the cops, the mayor goes to see Gordon and says, "Look, I'm sorry your daughter's dead, but you've been protecting him. You're out, Jim. The mayor says it's my ass, and I'm not going to take the fall for you." You're going to have to go up in front of the grand jury. You either give your badge now or you go through a trial. And I'm going like, this is the fucking grimmest thing I've ever written. I need a laugh in here. So I have Montoya and Bullock are watching daytime TV, and in the world like this, and there are a bunch of Batman's kind of B villains, including Harley. It's like Harley without the Joker, the Mad Hatter, the Riddler, a couple of others. And they're doing what any villain would do. And that's like, Bruce Wayne is Batman? Fuck, I'm suing the guy.
Yes.
And there's Johnny Cochran with a little rhyme, going, if the bat's on a spree, Wayne must pay the fee. This is like Rodney, at the aftermath of Rodney King, and I figured it would be a circus. It would be like daytime TV. You'd have all these guys painting themselves as like, we're sick people and Batman's beating us and now we want our money.
We're victims of this billionaire psycho who apparently has got a deep wallet.
Yeah. And in the larger sense, when I think about Gotham City, the only reason I can come up with that every one of these guys has not been executed, including Batman himself, is because the city just welcomes a sort of performance art crime. You're a performance criminal in Gotham City, and people just sort of look the other way for that. And if it's, the Joker kills 30 kids, okay, he's going to jail. But if it's the Riddler with his goofy giant traps, or the Mad Hatter with the hats or anything, all right, he'll be out on Monday and then he can do it again. We got to keep the tourists coming in. It's tolerated and encouraged to that degree. And
it's like the stoners in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
They're just like, it's part of our town.
Yeah. I mean, in Gotham City, they have Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. In LA, we have Kardashians. It's the same thing,
Genius.
And you can't, look at all the celebrities, who get in trouble and they go to rehab. Arkham is like rehab, really.
Oh my God, man. You're drawing the real world parallels too close. Unfortunately, we don't have a real Batman. All we have is a bunch of zero villains. No good Batman. All right, so wait, in the story, We'll take them all the way through it.
Yeah.
Eventually, they corner Batman. Jim Gordon corners Batman where?
On the rooftop, and he brings out Bane, and
Bane kicks the shit out of him. Batman holds his own, though.
Yeah, there's my homage / ripoff of Bad Boys, where there's that scene in Bad Boys where Sean Penn fills up
the original Bad Boys, not the one with Will Smith.
No, this is the one where he fills up the pillowcase with sodas and beats the shit out of it.
Yeah.
I swear I took that with both hands. I have Batman taking off his cape and all these bricks fall into it, and he beats the shit out of Bane with it. I just go, I got to use that. Here it is. And I figure, how else is he going to beat him? He needs something. He doesn't have a gun on him. And also Batman saying, like, Bane says, you would fight to the death, and Batman says, doesn't matter now.
He does, and it really doesn't. Delivery, he crushed it, man.
Yeah.
Like that's why, again, like whenever I read Batman, I hear Kevin Conroy's voice. He said when Bane's like, you would fight to the death, and he has that real grave. It doesn't matter now. Like he's heartbroken.
Yes,
he's lost Gotham. He's lost his family. He's lost Jim Gordon.
Yeah.
He's prepared to fucking lose his life on the roof, but so he will fight to the fucking death.
And then the very next exchange, he knocks Bane through the bat signal. It's sparking with electricity. Bane says, time to die. And Batman goes, you first. Cuts the venom, puts it in there and electrocutes him. The blast goes right into Bane's head. And then there's the scene, and he's knocked Gordon over, and Batman goes to him and he goes, please, Jim, for Barbara. And originally we had Gordon crying one tear, and then we thought, it almost looks too mushy. Let's just have Gordon kind of look up and take his hand. He's still not going to forgive, but he's going to save his life. And then Bane, with his dying gesture, rips up the bat signal, sends it rolling toward Batman, and knocks them both over.
He does die too. He literally hurls it, and then you watch Bane in the background go, ugh. And
they're killed by the bat signal, the one thing that draws them together.
Genius.
It's just like symbolism.
And they go plummeting. The last shot is they go plummeting off the roof.
Yeah.
And you start hearing
Barbara screaming, no.
And that's suddenly where you're like, okay, they're going to bring us in for a safe landing.
Okay, here we go.
Now I get it. And are we in the Batcave at that point?
And we're in the Batcave, and she's recovering because when she was fighting Scarecrow, she got gassed by the fear gas, and that brought out her worst fear.
Right.
Which is her fear about how things it might end for Batman, between Batman and her dad, not necessarily Batman. So now we realize the whole thing was from Barbara's point of view, and this was her worst case scenario. But still, not all that far from how I think it would end if, it all ended badly for Batman.
And it has a really beautiful, bittersweet, poignant ending to it, because she's like, now is where I'm going to choke up.
I got to tell my dad.
She wants
and here I'm going to cry again too. So
she goes, Bruce is like something like, and everything's better. Or she's like, not everything, or something. I
can't live with this. And Batman goes, I understand. You got to do what you got to do.
And you see her going to talk to.
She invites her dad over for dinner.
We're not going to get through the two fat bat bitches who cannot fucking get through the end of this poignant episode without rolling tears.
Thank you for putting in cleanup.
Go ahead. I'll let you. You're the writer. You take it. It's beautiful though, man. She sits down. Barbara Gordon sits down with Jim Gordon.
Yeah.
To essentially tell him, I am Batgirl.
Yeah.
What does he say?
He said, I need to talk to you. And he goes, uh-oh. And it's like, the other day, I was like, I'm seeing Poison Ivy.
I'm gay. With a supervillain.
It's like, Dad, I have to tell you about a job I've taken on recently. And he goes, Barbara, let me stop you right here. There's a lot. The gist of it is there are things you do that I can't know about. But I love you, and I love all of you. And that says, I love you as Barbara, and I love you as Batgirl.
Yes.
And then they hug, and it's like,
it's the dad conversation you want on everything. This just so happens to be about Batman.
And in that moment, it's like I had to give the audience a win, or pay off the story. I had to give them something out of the story, because they're not really going to see Batman fighting Bane to the death.
Right.
They're not going to see this, and it can't just be life is happy. It's got to be the win for the audience, and it's kind of between the lines is that Gordon knows about Barbara, he knows his Batgirl, and probably knows Bruce is Batman.
Yes. Yeah. I remember at the end of that episode going like, if he's saying, I don't want to know because blah, 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 it means I bet he suspects.
Yeah.
And then if he suspects this, then he probably suspects or knows that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same person.
And that brought up some interesting questions that we would have after that episode, because this was getting toward the end of our run. I'm saying, like, what if we do scenes where they're all together, and they're all in the costume? How do we play this? We can't really reference the episode directly because, there's always a chance that
it's out of
good chance. Yeah, it's out of order. The audience hasn't seen it, but we always would do things like whenever he's talking to Batman and Robin, Barbara's in the shadows or outside the window or something like that. A very subtle thing, but we just wanted to say that she's just a step removed.
A separation.
Yeah.
She's not like in his face. Like,
and not call, commissioner and, everything. It's me, your daughter, and stuff like that. But it was just one of those things where I think everybody has the one end of Batman story in them. Like you mentioned Neil's story and Alan Moore did, with Superman and everything. And that to me was like, this is the end of Batman story, but not really. It's
I know,
it's a way to have a cake and eat it too.
You did. You had both sides of it. It is a fantastic episode. I believe it's from not from Batman the Animated Series, but the Adventures.
The new Batman Superman Adventures.
Is that what it was on that point during that show?
Yeah, and because
was what they would do they would alternate between Superman and Batman.
No, we had a Superman and a Batman show together for an hour. And we do
half an hour of Gotham and half hour of Metropolis.
Yeah, and then they got rid of Batman because they said, well, we want a younger take on Batman. Do Batman Beyond. We got to put a kid in the suit. There's been this real trend in animation, and I think this is what kind of started. I mean, there have always been baby versions of characters, but ever since Batman Beyond, there's been a real trend in superhero cartoons like. Kids do not want stories told to them. They need to see themselves in the superhero. And I don't think you could do Batman the Animated Series today. You couldn't because, these are cyclical. They go through changes, but the current thinking that everybody buys into is that kids will only watch kids. They're only interested in kids. And if the kid on screen is not a direct reflection of them and their own experiences, they won't watch.
So Batman from now on has to be on the cusp of 20,
I guess so, or younger, or something.
It's true. Batman in the Animated Series, Batman is 35 or something like that. He occurs to you as a man of some. He's not young.
I always thought of him as about 30, 33, 32, whatever age Jesus is, 33, 32.
Oh my God, that makes a lot of sense. Man, fucking Batman as Jesus, same age, of course.
Yeah,
and just like Jesus, he gives his life.
Of course,
for us over and over again.
Every issue, every week, in some form or another.
What one beautiful piece of wisdom or can you impart on having toiled on the Batman character for so long? Is it toiling? Does it ever get like to be a job, or was it always a pleasure? Or do you feel? I could tell you're accomplished. You don't have to worry about like, did I bring something to it? When they talk about the character, your name's always in there.
Thank you.
So what do you? Give us a little something. There it is. The little something ever.
I can cry again.
I think that probably said more than anything else, man. Like, we're talking about shit that you wrote 20 years ago, if not longer.
Yeah.
And you've seen the episode all the way from the moment you wrote it through probably voice casting or recording, storyboards that you saw, when the first fucking like pencil sketches come back from wherever they animated, all the way to the finished episode, the DVD release, multiple airings on TV, every once in a while turning on, oh, fucking Batman's on.
Yeah.
You've seen it so many times, and still when you talk about Heart of Ice or when you talk about Over the Edge, you can get emotional enough to fucking tear up, get glassy.
Yeah.
Batman's written by a total pussy. That's what it says.
Totally.
In order to write Batman, you got to be real soft.
It's like my wife Misty. She'll walk around the house and she'll pass by my door and she'll like, and she'll go, oh God, he's written another story.
That's awesome.
There we go. Here he goes again. Or I'll go in and picture an idea. Okay, I have the story. What happens is, all right, okay, bring it. I think it's lovely you cry, but it's getting a little old after 7 years.
This has been a very enjoyable inaugural episode of Fat Man on Batman.
Fat Man on Batman.
Right away, man. I'll have to change that.
I actually thought about bringing cake, and then I thought that was probably, with a little Batman on it. But then I thought,
Would you be horrible to like, it's a podcast where these heavyset dudes talk about Batman and they eat cake. It's kind of metal.
Yeah.
It may be the ultimate podcast.
Yeah, I think so. You gonna have
thank
a theme
you
song?
for the. I will. I can't like. Of course, naturally, you want to like. Let's take one of the movie theme songs, but and then you want to do the Batman theme from the car. Batman.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I got to figure that one out. By the time they're listening to it, that part will have been figured out. Of course.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I mean, I think this is great fun, and
the first guest could only be you, man. You brought so much to the character in terms of like I've had a lifetime of loving Batman from the Adam West version all the way up to Nolan's version now, and yours will always stand head and shoulders for me above the rest because it's powerful writing. You gave a shit about that character. Not a lot of people prior to your regime gave a shit enough about those characters to write them with dignity, respect, to write them as human beings. They're simple morality tales, most of these superhero cartoons, but you didn't make them simple. They're fucking complex and grown up and adult, and you can show it to a woman without her being like, why would I let you put your dick in me? Grow up. Like I showed Jennifer how we got our kid named Harley Quinn. It wasn't me going, you're going to name this kid Harley Quinn. It wasn't even my fucking idea. We had just been dating, and I said, hey, man, like she said, I'm going to take a bath. I said, right on, because I knew I could take some pictures of her in the tub. But she said, I want something to read. You always talk about comic books. Yeah. And I said, well, read. And it was just like maybe a week or two after Mad Love had come out. So I was like, you got to read this, man. It's an awesome story. It's from the guys that do the Batman animated series, and it's the origin story of this character, Harley Quinn, the Joker's sidekick. Yeah. And I have a picture on my desk still to this day of Jennifer Schwalbach before she ever had a kid, before we were ever married, sitting in a tub with her boobs floating on the water, reading Mad Love. And there's a Burger King Star Wars glass sitting on the side of the tub with R2-D2 and C-3PO on it, and a little Woodstock bobblehead. Yeah. And later, after that picture, when she gets out of the tub, one of the first things she says is, this was excellent. And I was like, you read a lot of comics? She's like, never read any. I was like, well, but you're starting strong. This is really good, man. I said, I can tell you other stuff too. She goes, what a great name, Harley Quinn. That'd be a great name for a kid. I was like, yeah, right. And this is, again, like me and this chick are fucking and we're involved, but I don't know if we're going to be married or anything like that, let alone have children. So when she winds up getting pregnant, months later, and we were like, we willing it to be a girl, and the name was never in discussion. She was just like, let's call her Harley Quinn. I love that name from that comic.
Yeah, when you told me, I was so touched. I thought, are you really?
Oh man. And I tried to puss out, man. I've told this story before, but I tried to puss out the 0 hour when the kid was actually born and I saw her. I said, we can't name this kid Harley Quinn. That's cruel to do to a kid. Give her a joke name for the rest of her life and stuff. I said, they'll call her Portly Quinn if she's heavy, or Horley Quinn if she's like loose remotely or anything like that. If she's a girl, they'll attack her, man. And then Jen was feeding her in the hospital room. She goes, no, man, Harley Quinn is an excellent name. Harley is a badass name. Who would ever fight with that? Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, man, good point, good point. So she rescued the name. I was ready to be like, let's call her Helen or something. but instead we wound up going with Harley Quinn. And that's all because you got a job working on Batman years ago and said to yourself, the Joker's sidekick could be a girl who has a name. Yeah. Yeah. Genius work, man. You've done so much for the character, and you continue to do so much for the character.
I mean, I remember when I went to see Clerks, and because I got a great write-up in the LA Reader or the LA Weekly, and it says, really funny, got to go see it. And I saw it. I laughed my ass off. And shortly thereafter, there was a interview with you in like Us or People, where it had a photo spread of you at home, and sitting on your kitchen table next to your cereal are the Batman VHS. Yes. And I said, that's a cool guy. Not only, he knew the movie, and it's like, he's got my cartoons there. It's like, I felt touched.
That was a conscious decision. I remember that picture. It was for Time Magazine for their Gen X issue. I think it was. Yeah. And I remember, they're like, we're going to take a picture of you eating cereal. And I said, hold on. And I pulled over a stack of my tapes just because I was like, I want people to know I like this. Yeah. Even whether it's just like, I want the fuckers who make the show to know, or just like anyone out there. Again, mind you, this is pre-internet. Right. Most of these stories we're telling, this is before we could all get in touch with one another. Right. Long before the birth of a podcast. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you'd find each other at Comic-Cons or, on the fucking fanzines or Starlog or on the letters page of comic book. So before we were all connected to one another, It's amazing that like there's that weird tie, that weird like, hey man, I just want to put these tapes in the shot, and you actually not only saw the picture, but remember that's fucked up.
Yeah.
You did a great job, man.
Thanks, man.
You continue to do a great job with the character.
You too.
And that's going to do it for our very first episode of Fat Man on Batman. I'd like to thank our amazing first guest, man, Mr. Paul Dini, who put the man into the Batman, which sounds really dirtier than I meant it. I'm Kevin Smith, your host, saying tune in next time, folks, to Fat Man on Batman. Same bat time, same bat channel, smodcast.com.